Let's frame the problem for cloud adoption. So we have all been in the industry, hopefully for many years, and we have always had the client server model. The last couple of years, we have seen that the rise of Office 365, of the digital transformation. But from that perspective, also a lot of challenges came. We also had unmanaged device, like bring your own device. We had new cloud applications. The reason behind this is that it is no longer in the IT security factor that makes that decision. It's a business decision. A cloud application, the buying of a cloud application is only a credit card away. So if we look at these applications, we have many of them. We have internal applications, we have the managed applications, the applications that the company is known of, that they have bought a license for, but we also have a huge stretch tail of cloud applications which we are unaware of, which we call the unmanaged applications, or the unknown applications. We have seen in the industry regarding CASB that it all started with shadow IT. Shadow IT is mainly focused on giving you insight about these unmanaged or unaware applications. So moving on from a digital transformation perspective, let's say you have decided that you are going to adopt cloud applications. All new challenges arise because we are not longer in the boundaries. And once you are connecting to an application or a cloud application, the only thing you need is a username and password. And from that perspective, and that is something that is not very highlighted very much, from a cloud service perspective, it's all based off shared responsibility. So when you buy the service, you buy the service. You don't buy the security. Everything by what you put in there, there's mainly the data, that is in your own risk. And that is where CASBs came in, because CASBs can be the same level of, let's say, cloud-based firewall, which can have actions for your data, which you are storing into the cloud. If we look more into this, and especially from BitCloud's perspective, we are looking to a multi-mode CASB solution. What is multi-mode? Multi-mode is a solution that delivers all three of the possibilities of a CASB. That is API, forward proxy, and reverse proxy. For API scanning, that is the oldest one, which is in the systems with all the CASBs started off. It's all based on data which is already stored in the cloud. It is out of bands. It's not real time, even though that's we sometimes hear it's near real time from a CASB vendor. That is impossible. The reason is that the CASB is not in control. We are connecting to a cloud service, and the cloud service is telling the CASB how often it can connect and how much data can go there. So that is what we call API calls. We also see that nowadays with the new applications, if they support an API, they are limited. So they give you for free, let's say 1 million API connections, which looks like very much, but in normal cases, you will be out of your API calls within a week. So API has this value in the full system, but real-time analytics is much more needed in these times. So moving on to a forward proxy model. Forward proxy model is doing something with an endpoint. So you need to install an endpoint to forward your traffic to a proxy to the cloud application. The only downside from this is that in the old day in what we have seen or what we know, the challenges putting endpoints on systems. If it's a managed system, it can be challenging, but if it's a bring your own device, you are not even allowed. The extras that you get from a forward proxy perspective is the real-time analytics, the DLP, the real-time threats. So all the benefits are already there. The only downside is that you still need to install an endpoint. I'm moving first to step 4, I will come back to step 3 about Smart Edge SWG, because it has a different story. Reverse proxy is our methodology to support any device, any app. What we will do is that we leverage on a single sign-on event. Single sign-on is your identity provider for cloud applications. And from that perspective, we can come in line and all the security features, real-time security features are in place. The positives of this is that you don't need to bother all your endpoints. You arrange this at a cloud application level. Moving back to the Smart Edge SWG, since we have the knowledge of a lot of cloud applications, and underneath a cloud application is nothing more than a URL, and since the BitGlass had the opportunity to monitor and classify unmanaged applications, our missing link was the Smart Edge SWG. So the web filter component. That is something that we have built last year, and that is now in the product. Also, we see that Gartner has changed the spectrum from CASB, although it's quite new, to SASE, which stands for Secure Access, Secure Edge. SASE is a combination of multiple cloud or internet-based solutions. I'll come to that in a short while. So if we need to get into the flow and start inspecting traffic, we of course need to be having the identity. The identity is something which is a critical phase for cloud adoption. Most companies don't realize that they need an end identity provider, but I'll explain in a different slide why it's one of the critical capabilities. Visibility. If a CASB is in the path of your cloud application, you get a tremendous amount of visibility. You can see who is using which application, what are they downloading, what are they uploading, the full set of information you would have in your normal security posture. UEBA and anomaly detection is nowadays key elements in these strategies. So UEBA is that you are monitoring user behavior based on what is the user doing or where are they accessing it from. Quite an important step in cloud adoption, because like I said in the first couple of minutes, the only way that you see it now is that you have a username and a password. From that perspective, the rest is unknown to you. If you have the username and password, you are allowed into the system. And from that perspective, we are moving to zero trust remote access. Zero trust is the system where BitGlass has been built on. We had it from the beginning that you could name your user groups based on device, based on location, and then you had an action policy. From that scenario, you are in full control of who can access your application and your data from anywhere. Coming back to the Secure Access Service Edge, the SASE, the new structure of the new quadrant from Gartner, what does it withhold? So we had the CASBs already there, and we also had VPN, web security, SD-WAN, and Gartner has said, since that they are all internet related, basically they are all going to the internet, and from their perspective, you get your visibility, you control your identity. That's why they have converged it into one quadrant. So I think from moving forward, also if you are doing investigations for your digital transformation, that this is the new word. So I wouldn't say that CASB is gone, but it will be an element of SASE. So how do we start this digital transformation? I think we can all align to discovery and control, shadow IT reporting. Shadow IT reporting gives you insight of the applications used inside of your network. BitGlass is active for 8 years now. And from that perspective, we have a very large database. That large database holds 600,000 applications and growing every day. The reason is that we don't do manual labor on it. We have an artificial intelligence engine in there, and that is classifying new applications, also adding URLs to existing applications. Applications start, for instance, in one region and they are exposed to multiple regions after, which will get, of course, based on the extension .de, .nl, .co.uk, still means it's the same application. Also, we have added, because of the secure edge technology, threat intelligence about these new applications. So we can see how safe they are. Those are leveraged in a trust level. From a discovery and control app user perspective, we can have from the reporting, actionable reporting immediately. You can see the reports, and then if you see something that is like, okay, we don't want to have that into our network, you can have a control pane in there, which is consistent of coaching, blocking, of making read-only. Nobody really likes block anymore. If you have an application which is not allowed by your organization and you pop up a block to your end user base, they get frustrated. So from that perspective, you could do having a coach page. A coach page is nothing more than a simple web page saying it's not allowed. But the nice thing is that you can redirect them to an application which is allowed or which you have bought a license for inside your organization. The read-only control, if I can explain this best, is I take the example of what's WeTransfer. I think most of the people have come across this application. The problem is you don't have visibility on it, but your third parties are working with WeTransfer for sharing files. So that's a tough one to call. So with the read-only controls, you are able to still allow the application, so your third party, to send your data, but you can, based on, because of its read-onliness, say, okay, we can't upload any company data to that application. So your working flow is not in jeopardy, but you still leverage on the usability of the application. Then we come across to the identity. The identity for BitClass is key. So if we see the flow here in a normal way, when you connect to a cloud application, you connect from your browser, and a cloud application is run in the browser. If you open up Office 365 and you go to an application, it always, the first time, takes a bit of time, and then the application is downloaded in the browser and executed. So once you connect to this browser, you put in your username and password, and then if you have an identity provider set up, you don't need to fill out your password immediately. You only fill out your email address, and then it's taking you to your identity provider. That identity provider then asks you for the password. After you have entered your password, you will be redirected normally to your cloud application. In the case if BitClass becomes in between, we follow the same steps, except that for the cloud application, you don't have the identity provider of the service that you have withheld, which can be ADFS, Okta, OneLogin, Ping, any SAML2 compliance identity provider, but you will use BitClass. BitClass can be an IDP on its own, but we can leverage between third parties as well. So what happens is you go as the PC, you go to your cloud application, you have changed your federation not to your existing IDP but to BitClass. So the response goes back to BitClass, then is redirected to your third party. Once that access has been verified, the session comes back to BitClass, and then we are in the path of you and the application, which gives us all the benefits I was just explaining regarding zero trust networking and all the DLP features. So what is the unique thing there? Because there are multiple CASBs out there right now that are offering a reverse proxy as well. So from BitGlass perspective, for what makes us unique is that we have dynamic rewriting algorithms in our solution. So once we have done the identity flow, so we are in the middle, then we send with the application a wrapper. This is basically like a VM. It's just a piece of code, and alongside with your application to the browser. Any URL which is clicked within the application is translated immediately to us, and we know, because of the application and because that we are in line, how to send this to the SaaS application. Why is this different compared to our competition? Our competition does it on static URL listings. So they will go to an application, they will click the application within the application where they need to be, they lock all the URLs, and those are hard-coded in an XML sheet, which is just a list of URLs. And once you get to that application, you are then translated. The thing is, cloud applications, they change very quickly. Our development brings out every 2 weeks a new version. So the same thing goes for SaaS applications. SaaS applications are constantly changed based on development. So URLs are changed. So once, if you are doing it statically, once something is changed, it will break. It can be fixed easily, but it will be breaking. Our Smart Edge security web gateway is a bit of a unique one. We don't use any devices inside of a network. It is a purely endpoint-based proxy, and it will connect directly from its own database, unless that is so new, then it will contact the BitGlass database on the internet. Excuse me. Why is this really different? Is that we are not backhauling any traffic. So a lot of web filter specialists, they have an endpoint as well, and they are the secure web market. But you always need to go to one of their data centers. That data center backhauling is causing totally different problems nowadays, because we see far more applications being geo-locked. Geo-locked is that, for instance, if you are coming from a certain area, you can't access the application. I think the BBC is one of the biggest examples that you can make. BBC, if you're not from the UK, or if you're not coming from a UK IP address, then you are not allowed to view the BBC. So that's the same for cloud application. That is controls that you could put in place. And we see more and more SaaS applications providing the same way. Because the SaaS application, their main structure is that you can access from anywhere. Secondly is that we have added DLP and malware inspection, all from the same and single endpoint. This leaves us to a total security for endpoints, remote workers, and especially in these times that we are having a lot of remote workers, and I think that they will stay for the next coming months, and maybe forever, maybe not full, but in a certain way. So we need to accommodate these users as well. Unmanaged app control. Thing is, we don't need any signatures. So it works for any app, and we can work with any application. There are a lot of reports in there, and it's all about risk compliance. You can add upload paths. So if you are the user of unmanaged apps, then the URLs that you are using for your upload paths, those are added into your personal space. That's, and the rest that we already covered. So where is BitGlass running? BitGlass is running in AWS. We have been doing that since 2013. Our uptime is even better than AWS. It's 99.99, and last time is extra 9. The reason why we chosen for AWS is because we can use their polyscale architecture. What does this mean? It's elastic, so it can grow and can downsize. We have built our service based on that. We use their global content delivery network as well. It's high performing and it has a lot of regulatory compliance settings already there. Most of the CASBs are running in AWS if they are not using a proprietary data center. With the coming of secure web gateway filtering, our SASE, we've called that the SASE fabric. We have even gone further. So we had our global data centers, which are all over the world, but we also now have local data centers, and each local data center has multiple content delivery networks. This is for us that we can limit the delay time for accessing web pages. So any smart agent has his own database, but it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you will always connect to one of the closest content delivery networks, caches, and that is uploading to the global data center. So the solutions, why do you need to think about BitClass regarding their CASB offerings? For instance, for OneDrive, Box, the storage devices, sorry, the storage SaaS applications. So in those applications, you have no visibility from the application itself. How are you going to protect your intellectual property? How are you going to protect your malware? I talked about shared responsibility. They provide the service. We still need to provide the security levels, and you are in control of your own data. So BitClass provides this with a real-time malware scanner in their offerings for the forward proxy and the reverse proxy. We also have a malware scanner for the API piece, but not every application is API aware. It's only the big 15. The largest applications are supporting that. Every application has an API, but it's not regarding files. So every cloud application has an API for user logins or user adding or removing, but not for file control. So again, if you have API, we still need it. We can protect you with malware, but it will be always after the fact. Real-time analytics will always come to a forward or a reverse proxy. And if you are using reverse or a proxy, forward proxy, or API, we have a set of DLP features, which can constrict of blocking, encrypting, DRMing, denying, and of course blocking or allowing. Sorry. DRM is digital rights management. It's not as sophisticated as we would do with Microsoft or other specific products, where you can set rights and follow the document and then still have all the settings in place. Now, what we do is that it is for downloads. It's a download action where that it is the content is locked. You still need to log in, and it becomes read-only. Encrypting data in the cloud is becoming much more popular, especially for storage. There's one thing that is broadly overlooked, is that once you are encrypting data inside of the cloud, once you are uploading it, you can't edit it anymore. And that's the same with every vendor. Once you are uploading a cloud in encrypted state, you can't edit it anymore. Once you have downloaded again, it's fully editable. But we can also turn it around, saying, okay, you can still add your live content in the application, but once it's downloaded, it needs to be encrypted. That is something that BitClass can perform as well. Where do we stick out is, especially for API scanning, is the speed. We have a high level of performance because of the network of the polyscale architecture, and we are famed for delivering the API controls much quicker on scanning based. We are still listening to the APIs of the cloud application, but once the API scan is started, we finish very quickly. Productivity apps. So these are the main applications, the big ones: Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Slack. All of them have security features enabled. The problem is it's 9 out of 10 times a pain, and it's a per application setting. So you need to go into any application, every application, make your settings, test it, etc., etc. For BitClass, because we are in front of all these applications, you can make one setting for all, and it doesn't really matter anymore. It just works. The typical rollout is between 3 weeks, and there's no interaction with your users. So you don't need to have a full testing panel for all your users. You configure the whole set, and based on the zero trust networking, you can of course have groups yes or no. So you can say, for instance, when you are adopting a new application, and we have seen this with many banks, is that they adopt a new application, they start with the identity, everything is in place, and then you need to build your rule set. That's challenging because you don't want to immediately have that for the whole company. So one of the features is that you can say, because of the zero trust networking and the rule base, is saying everyone goes to the application direct, except for a certain group where you are testing your whole DLP settings or your access setting. This is totally different to a lot of other CASB vendors because everything with it getting in line is a turnkey solution. And then I think that is where we excel in is, for instance, secure HCM, ERP, but let's say the long tail of applications here. Applications that don't have any security, they don't have any API. We can work with any application as long as it's on a secure channel and it's supporting a single sign-on. You configure this and you can roll. We are not constricted about any extra additionals that we need to investigate. If you know your login URL, you can add the application. If the application has an guidance where they are using, for instance, underneath an S3 bucket or an Azure blob for their data storage, of course that is something that you need to configure in the application. But if it's not there and it's just on the application itself, it just works. Sorry. There are also applications that don't have single sign-on. That is something that we can do as well. Because we are an IDP, we can leverage to public clouds or private applications based from an identity provider perspective. This is that once you are logging in, you get tiles, and these tiles are connecting to your application inside. The only thing that we really need to have is for the private applications is a firewall, because you want to have the access control list in place, or a firewall connection IP list control, so that you can basically limit it, the connections to your application. And something what we also support, or that is very unique for us, is field-based encryption. Field-based encryption is something that we have designed for banks, and we do that based on a per application setting, because you need to have your whole database structure. What we do, if you have a structured data system, which is more normal nowadays in cloud applications, we can encrypt it based on a key that we can host at our level or in your own HSM. We do that at 256 bits, and then we do a salt on there. So that's compared to the competition, much stronger security feature. The addition that we did, and that was quite unique, that we can do it based on location. So what we built for one bank is, because we had this feature enabled, is that what they wanted from a certain area, once they were putting in data, that it was not visible for the rest of the world. For instance, take Salesforce, ServiceNow. Those are applications that are used within the organization in a grand scheme of spectrum. So every single country is connecting to the same database. But because of legislations, that's not always the key element. For instance, for ServiceNow, you can put in there a lot of details regarding GDPR. So what we designed is, for instance, that once you are editing data into the database, let's say from the Netherlands, and you are connecting to the same database from Belgium, Norway, the UK, doesn't really matter, the data was encrypted. And then it was only visible from the Netherlands. If that user, which was editing the data in the field from the Netherlands and moved to Belgium, he was not able to see that data anymore. And we can have mixes and matches based on that. A very unique feature. The last thing from this security model is that we have secure mobility. The secure mobility is a limited set. It's a proxy for your active sync. The thing is that we saw in the market that a lot of mobile apps could do wipes, but they couldn't do selective wipes for your mail mainly. So that is something that we had developed. It's an active sync proxy, which is standing between you and your mail server, which is of course Office 365 Online, Google Mail, it could also be Exchange. And from that perspective, we can set in the middle. We can do a selective wipe on your mailboxes, but we also can provide DLP. DLP is, in this case, is that documents or text that is synced to your normal device. It's there visible, but once synced to your mobile device, it's not allowed, or it will be masked depending on what your needs. And that is the overview of the mobility. So if we recap all the critical capabilities which nowadays arise from an organization, we see the major SaaS apps, we see the long tail SaaS apps, we see the internal SaaS apps, but we also see applications built on AWS, Google, or Azure. All of these is something that BitPlus can protect. That's why we are moving to, or we are claiming that multi-mode is the way to go, because you can have any single option within BitPlus. It's not an extra payment, it's all in the system. Additionally, you will have zero trust access controls to your applications, your unmanaged app control, agentless, so you can have your unmanaged devices and your managed device controlled exactly the same way. It doesn't really matter if the user is using his own device or the company laptop. Of course, you can have different ways around it. We support field-based encryption, file-based encryption, and zero trust malware solution, which we do with 2 vendors. And that is my next slide, is all our integrations. So we have for threats, we have CrowdStrike and Silence. With identity providers, we have basically everyone, but I always name a couple that are here. All our logging is for 30 days in the cloud. Afterwards, we leverage to a SIM control. We don't store any payload data, so it's only metadata. From network perspective, we can work with any of the vendors for shadow IT, for leveraging, and we can work with any labeling party. This is something that I didn't highlight yet. We see for DLP and controlling your data, much more labeling tools nowadays rather than really doing DLP actions purely on every single file. So if you have something like Titus, Bolton James, Netflix, VB script that is doing a tag, Microsoft is adding a tag, we can work with any vendor protecting your data on that role. Last slide for me is to re-emphasize that we are a full cloud security platform where we can protect any application, any device, and any network. Regarding which challenges you have, we can make something fit. Thank you.
Besides DLP, when they are moving to the cloud, can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, it started with DLP. For instance, like I told in my presentation, it started with DLP because you are storing your data there. We see a massive switch to zero trust networking. So as long as the application has a secure access, or they can control that access, we see a steep concern there. An additional thing is that what BitGlass can do is, based on that access control, it's a bit like a UEBA policy, user behavior, is, for instance, you are working from your local office, and during the day, you are switching to another location. So if you only have an identity provider, in the morning you are challenged with username and password, you have your authentication layer, maybe a two-factor authentication, and you're in. The tendency for cloud applications is, once you are in, they place a cookie, that's basically like a control thing in your browser, and the application can be open sometimes forever, and sometimes for 90 days. If I take Microsoft as the example, because that is the most common used in this region as well, the default cookie setting is for 90 days. So if you don't log out of your system, it stays there for 90 days. If you close down your browser, you open up your if you reopen your browser, you go to portal.microsoft.com, you're immediately logged in. So from that perspective, if you are changing locations, once you're in, you don't have any control anymore. That is something that BitGlass does, and that is the zero trust networking bit. So if you just move to a new location, we see the IP change, we can leverage this because we are in line, we can give you a challenge for a multi-factor authentication. We can even prohibit for certain locations. We can even prohibit certain countries or even certain devices on the fly. So that's what we see nowadays more and more, the zero trust networking edge.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeroen. Another question, well, it's more like a functional question. Am I able to, when my personnel is connecting to the BitGlass solution, am I able to disable like the save options? So just the read only?
So can you elaborate a bit more? Sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Yes. Can you repeat the question?
Am I able to change the controls when my colleagues are accessing the network, or my workforce is accessing the network or the cloud applications, to just say I want them to be read only?
Oh, yes. Yes. So for any single application, we have a read-only feature in there. We have that for the unmanaged applications, but we also have that for the managed applications. So you can make any single application read-only based on the data that you are flowing in. Depending on the use case, I would be. The same thing goes for encryption. I would be careful with these kinds of things because I've seen in POCs which I conducted that everybody wanted to do encryption in the cloud, and then they were like, okay, you start the POC, they do all the uploads of files and encrypt it, and yeah, oh, we can't work with them anymore. Yeah, that is, you really need to have a thinking part out there. But there's BitGlass that can help you all the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question I have is, what does a deployment of the BitGlass solution look like, and what services are included? You mentioned that, well, everything is included in the license. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, our basic license is a three app license, which we call the standard edition. I'm not sure if that is the best name to call it, but it is what it is. And a standard edition has 3 applications, so you can enable 3 SaaS applications where you have a license for. If you buy one of the license of BitGlass, you get full support from us, but we also have a deployment team. So once you have bought the license, you will be transitioned from an SE who does the transition document. Then from the transition document, the professional services team takes over. You have an intake. They put all the dots and spaces the way that you want to use the system in place. And you will get an appointed engineer during the whole cycle. And once that's finished and you have signed off on that, then the support kicks in there. And then because of SOC 2 compliancy, every change needs to be accommodated by an agreement from the company itself.
Okay.
So it's a full deployed system by BitGlass.
Okay, so you can just get to work and no extra rabbits out of the hat, as we call it in the Netherlands.
Yes, indeed. So I think that is a very underlight situation, because I've been in different places. The A to Z helpability from BitGlass, I think that is a huge value, especially if you are in that digital transformation. You need to set up identity providers, you need to have them connected. How does the application work? So that is basically what we take away from you. We help you, but we still need, of course, your input on how it needs to be working from your perspective. So that is where we did, but anything based on extra hands, as we would say it, hands that are needed, that is all done by BitGlass. So the knowledge level is done by BitGlass. You need only some hands in the network for instance, user synchronization and those kind of things, but it's limited.
Okay, thank you very much.